Welcome, Amber. Thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Barriers podcast. We are thrilled to have you here and learn more about you and your journey. I'm really curious. You have an amazing background, and I'm looking forward to just like digging right into it. But let's share with our audience right now, because I'm sure they want to know, who you are, your journey, and kind of what led you to where you are now in your career.
Yeah, so I have always been someone who has been curious about the world around me. I was very fortunate in high school to figure out what I wanted to do early.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wanted to be a corporate attorney and also potentially a child advocate attorney until I did a project in high school where I had to design and market my own product. And
Mm.
I decided that it was really important with my team member to do research with all of the different groups for our brand called Color Me Hosiery that changed
Mm.
colors when you
Uh-huh.
washed it in cold water or warm water. And we
Uh-huh.
figured it would work because our doll's hair would do that. And it was also made from nylon. And so when we submitted the project, apparently I had done 10 pages of research and did some target segmentation, all these things that I wasn't taught to do. And my teacher
Mm.
said, this is really advanced for you since you're 17. I didn't tell you to do this. She said, most students gave me a paragraph. You gave me 10
Uh-huh.
pages. And she said, and I know you wrote all of this because you make deliberate grammar, like she called
Mm-hmm.
them mistakes. But whenever I was talking about Black people, I would always capitalize the B. And this was in the
Mm-hmm.
late 90s before Webster decided that's what we should be doing. But
Right.
I was like, no, we're going to capitalize the B and I will get marked down. I'll take the A minus because it's right. And I turned
Uh-huh.
out to be right. But anyway, when she said to me that, oh, you could do this for a job, if you really enjoyed it. And that was it
Mm-hmm.
for me. I went to college. I chose to be a marketing major instead of advertising because there was more, math involved.
Mm-hmm.
I went on to get a master's in advertising. I worked in advertising. I got a PhD in advertising. I taught collegiate for a while. That wasn't great. I went back into the
Mm-hmm.
agency. So I am here now. And this is all I've done because I love to really understand people, to
Mm-hmm.
understand how to connect with them. And then also for the purposes of a business end. And so that's how I got here. Conceptually, getting the PhD, there was
Mm-hmm.
plenty that I learned in that process, like focusing on culture,
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship, and consumer activism and how consumer groups have moved and pushed change by
Right.
way of their purchase. That has impacted my work and it continues to do so. But ultimately, what I've learned is to the extent that I can get down to the bottom of things, which my PhD program forced,
Right.
um, then I can be successful, not just in my work, but also in my personal life as
Mm-hmm.
well. Mhm.
Wow, that is so powerful to really have the confidence, right, of being able to, no matter what you do personally, professionally, that you have the competency and the aptitude to like figure it out, right?
Mhm.
And that in and of itself helps you move forward. Can you talk about, because you've overcome a lot of adversity, right? And if you really, you're an anomaly in terms of, all of the education that you have and the clarity that you had early on of like the marketing, and it was almost kind of that natural kind of like effortless kind of skill set that came to you. um can you talk about how, maybe fears and maybe limiting beliefs, did you ever struggle with that, and how did you push forward through that?
Yes, I have lots of insecurities. And I always have. I've always been, and it wasn't until I got some clarity. I mean, I'm in my 40s now, my early 40s, but like it took me a while to get clarity in my voice. Like
Mm,
I've always been a deep thinker. My mother
mhm,
used to say growing up, that I was too smart for my own good because I would ask, very particular questions about the world around me and what was happening. And I was a deep thinker. And she would just say, young lady, I just need you to relax and go play for a little bit because it's doing too much. But I think my voice has always been a bit beyond my years, and it made me a little bit insecure when I was younger, because sometimes I know that I would be processing things in a way that sometimes teachers and adults weren't doing, or people around me who were, say, more senior, they weren't doing that. And I worried about putting them in a corner, from like a conversation perspective, them not being able to get out of that corner and sort of blaming me for their own lack of knowledge or experience.
Right.
And I struggled with that a lot. But I think being a college professor actually worked a lot of that out of me, because it helped me to approach my conversations and my experiences and what I bring to the table as an educator. And that's not about overpowering others with one's intellect. It's about sharing and offering exchange, and then being able to redirect, and also asking really great questions, like really great questions that offer people the opportunity to challenge their own thinking, without necessarily like, lecturing to other people. Because even when I was in the classroom full time, I still didn't like sort of lecturing. I liked having conversations, and I liked people to have space to be able to disagree, to bring all of whatever they grew up with to the table. And let's interrogate it, and let's think about it. If we are, going to be serious scholars, or we're going to be serious business people, then we have to be willing to, have those conversations and allow ourselves to be challenged. And I allow myself to be challenged all the time. And I think that that's something that people see as a value in me, and that I also want to deliver to others.
That's so important. And I mean, because the power of like what you were describing to me, and that idea of that social learning, of hearing other people's stories, that might expand your frame of reference in not really, in shifting your perspective, right? But I also think what's important is having your own perspective, right? Of having that confidence to share that perspective. And I think that's what, in just a little bit of getting to know you and your background of being confident in that perspective, right? In a sense, it's kind of building that personal brand of yourself, or that reputation of being able to share that perspective or tell your own story. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, one, you're a master, you're an expert in the idea of marketing and branding and those types of things, but it's just as important for a company or a product or a business. It's just as important for a person or a human being to really think about, what is my brand? What is that story that I'm telling? Can you talk a little bit about that, and how you yourself, what are the keys to really building that personal brand or that story, and having that perspective and sharing with others so that others learn as well?
Yeah. So I have two ways of considering that. One is the fact that I'm a Christian, like practicing.
Right.
In like from the perspective of following Christ, but
Right.
then also from the perspective of like social justice, Martin Luther King, like, that part of the Bible. Okay,
Right.
so,
Right.
you talk to other people, they'll have a different perspective. I just want to be clear what mine is. And so that is the foundation of my storytelling, and the foundation of like why I do the work that I do, and how I do it, and the approach to it. And one thing that I will say about Jesus that I definitely admired, there are several places in the Bible where he always went to people. It wasn't the expectation that people come to him. And I think that brands need to have that perspective, is to go to the people, is to be there for the people, is to support the people, is to enable others. and, especially bigger brands to, have the best experience that they can, and to be, a part of that, and to not, downgrade that, or to not be so caught up in your own brand and your own ego that you miss the opportunity to really be relevant in people's lives. And
Right.
so, because like I have that foundation, it's driven everything. And I had to also sit back and think about, what is my purpose in life, right? So regardless of who I work for, what I do, I had to get down to that purpose is first grounded in my faith. So I prayed over this.
Right.
And what I came to is, I want to tell stories from an atypical truth and give more people the opportunity to tell those stories who otherwise would have been left out or overlooked. If I can do that, it doesn't matter if I'm working for myself, if I'm working for a big advertising agency, if I'm volunteering, if I'm doing that, then I am living out my purpose, and then I am the happiest that I can be. And plus, I also believe I'm doing what God has called me to do in this life. So if I'm doing that, I'm good.
That's beautiful. And I think what it is, leading by example, right? And understanding what are your core values, what are you, and lead with those, right? And making sure that, at the end of the day, it's that internal validation opposed to the external validation. And I think that's really, really important, because I think sometimes we, even in the cohorts and the coaching, cohorts that we coach, there's so many times where women, will make decisions based on the external validation, or the whole, likability thing that, well, I want people to like me. So you kind of go against that core, kind of like that inner, your gut, or that inner voice, or that, the values that you have for yourself, and make different decisions. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like, what techniques have helped you in making those difficult decisions, or taking risks that you, like you said, the atypical story, or the, the atypical truth, right? What helps you? What techniques really help you move forward, even though you know that you might get a little bit of noise or pushback, but moving forward with what you truly believe?
So I think in my mid-20s, I decided that I was going to be more interested in what was real and present in front of me versus just what I wish things would be. Because if you can actually deal with what's really happening, and sort of the history and the foundations that brought you to that point, you can have more of a clear vision for the future, because you know where you come from. So that's one thing. The other thing that I decided, probably even earlier than that, was that I was going to focus more on being fair than being liked. And I have prioritized fairness. Now, there have been people that have decided that they like me, as a result of that. And, I happen to be very well liked where I work now. I happen to be very well liked on my teams, but I don't know that it's necessarily because I'm just more likable, but the value of fairness is one that I think that people appreciate. And the fairness is what gets me respect. So again, like for some people, I'm not even sure that all of the people who I think like me, quote unquote, actually do. But what I'm feeling is respect. But that's because I strive for fairness, meaning that I treat everybody the same. That if I have a particular standard, that standard gets applied across the board. I was like that with my students. And I'm like that now. Even when I was teaching, my students would say, oh, she's tough, but she's fair. Like, she's like, if I didn't get extra credit, nobody's getting extra credit. Dr. Chenevert don't play. And it's the same here. And it requires a lot of discipline, because it's easy to be sort of, going with the wind. But I was also, as a Black girl, growing up in the United States, and especially in the South, by two Black parents who like lived through the civil rights movement. I was never raised that being liked was an option for
Mm,
me in order to make it in this life. It just was never presented as something that could be a way for me to, you know, get to success. Oh, I
mm-hmm,
have to be liked. That was never my parents'
mm-hmm,
um, conversation with me, that you need to work hard, that you need to show up and you need to be good and you need to
mm.
be better than good. That whole, Black people say you got to be twice as hard, work twice as
Yes.
hard to get half as much, that kind of thing. Like that's what I learned, good
Mm-hmm.
or bad or indifferent. But that whole likability thing was never anything that was put on me, especially from my mother and my father. It was, no, you need to do the right thing. You need to always do what's right. You need to show up and be your best. And then you need to, you know, advocate for yourself.
Yes.
um, but those were the main things. I will honestly say I didn't really have that struggle, you know, with
Mm-hmm.
likability. Maybe in high school, you know, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, but
Right.
that
That's so powerful. And that's so insightful. Because like you know, I grew up in a very traditional Mexican American family and, you know, also work twice as hard, keep your head down, work really hard. But I think one of the key things that you said that really resonated with me was the idea of advocating for yourself. And I think that is a lesson that I learned the hard way of, like, you know, you can't just keep your head down and work really hard. You've got to pick up your head, do a little bit of that self-promotion that sometimes goes against the grain of
mm-hmm,
who we are, right?
mm-hmm,
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because self-promotion, every time I talk about it with, you know, women that I coach or in my, you know, over my career, you get women who like cringe when we talk about self-promotion or advocating for ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, how did you kind of master the art of self-promotion? And, you know, is it something that you still are honing, or is it something that you're like, no, I learned really, you know, learned the lessons and I learned how to do it. And this is how, you know, someone can advocate for themselves.
I'm still struggling with that. Like,
Yes.
you know, I've gotten better over the years at advocating for like money,
Mm-hmm.
promotion, compensation, that kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
like the whole like what's your sort of company brand, navigating social media, I'm so bad at that because I really just want to do the work. I don't
Mm-hmm.
find as much joy in like I love this conversation.
Right.
I really really do. But I just don't find a whole lot of joy in like just trying to like, oh, I'm gonna be on this panel and I'm gonna do this and that. I'm
Right.
doing it, I am, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
finding sort of my way into it, and I know that it's valuable and I know that it's important,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for my own personal brand, but for my own career. But the self promotion is hard for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I just want to. Why can't I just do the work? Because people don't. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not the thing that people see, you know,
Right.
oftentimes. And so, like, how do you begin to document? You know, I have
Mm-hmm.
at least gotten better at documenting the work that I'm doing and my contribution. Um, I'm still trying to figure out how to best package that
Mm-hmm.
internally on a regular basis, but I feel like I'm getting close. But you do have to make a plan for it. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
going to happen. You have to decide like what are the things that you want to consistently share, where does it need to go, who does it need to be with, and then how does that help to craft and guide where you want to go
Mm-hmm.
with your career. And I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do and be when I grow
Mm-hmm.
up, but in the
Right.
meantime I at least want to get what I can get.
Right.
So I figure it out. So I struggle with that. I think I always have. Because my
Mm-hmm.
parents were still very, you know, if you do the work and you put your head down and people will notice, it's just not true. Like you have to do the work and you also
Yes.
have to be seen. And
Yes.
within this virtual environment, it means you really have to be thoughtful about like how you're going to showcase what you're doing and really being able to like work on amplifying some of your own work.
Thank you for that, because I think the reinforcement of hearing the message that it's uncomfortable, it feels awkward for us, but there is a necessity to it that we have to tell our own story, or our story is going to be told for us, right? And so really being able to, dedicate that, the energy and the effort to being able to do it, against kind of the chagrin of like, I hate this, it's painful, but it's necessary. So I think that's the important message, is that others, that we do have to carve out some time in order to do that and own our story. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about what you've mentioned a little earlier. One, you're a deep thinker. And you have mentioned lots of times of really thinking about, even when you're talking about your self-promotion, and just put some thought into it. And so to me, it seems that you have a probably habit or daily ritual of, carving out that time to think. And I don't think sometimes people realize how important think time is, and how it can really help you in that, career. So can you share a little bit about, as being this natural deep thinker, are there any daily habits or rituals that you do in order to kind of give yourself that time to think?
I I ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely am a huge believer in journaling. I don't do it every day, but that was a practice that my mother started in me when I was
Mm-hmm.
little, that I continue to do. I have one journal. I have several journals, but the one of the journals that I enjoy the most is one where I keep a personal journal that, kind of talks about my life and my experiences, but by
Mm-hmm.
way of lessons I've learned. So I
Mm.
think I started that one when I was like 26, and I have
Mhm.
several since, I started it, because I'm 42 now, but I
Mhm.
think I'm up to less than 105, I think, at
Mhm.
this point. Um, and it's and I try to be like a little bit I try to be somewhat profound when I write these lessons, just so that they're interesting, because I
Uh-huh.
wanted to be able to kind of look back on it years later, or have a future generation look at it and say, oh, this is an interesting one. But I think it's important to sort of chronicle what you're learning along the way.
Mhm.
And in doing that, you can begin to see how that can somewhat apply to your work. Like
Mhm.
one of my favorite lessons that I wrote down is, don't judge a book by its cover, even if it's beautiful.
Mm.
So, the first part of it is something that we've always heard. The beautiful part is actually where we can get caught up.
Right.
It's easy to stay away from things that don't seem shiny, glittery,
Mhm.
or whatever. But you can really be drawn in by things that look really good and beautiful on the
Yeah.
surface, and you can get caught up in those things. That could be romantic, or it could be work, or a job, or a company, or or a church. It could be just several things, but
Mhm.
it's really, that was one of those things about getting beneath the surface and really figuring out what's going on. But I think allowing yourself time to process
Mhm.
and write, and dream is so important. Like, to
Yes.
imagine in the future and what things can be for yourself, even when nothing seems like it should, like it's fallen
Mhm.
into place. And just to allow yourself to have that hope.
Mhm.
So I think those are the things that I do consistently. Now, I don't always do them every day.
Mhm.
Sometimes I get caught up in the day just like everyone else, but just
Yes.
really understanding that we need that space.
Mhm.
The other thing that I will say is, one of my I won't call her name, but one of my former church members from when I lived in Texas posted something on Facebook that was just so profound to me that I need to
Mhm.
write down. But she said, do not get upset with your family for violating boundaries that you have not set.
Mm.
Meaning that if you need space and time for yourself to do a particular thing, you need to express that to your family and the people who live with you and your friends, so that you can have that space and time to do that. Because otherwise you're going to be frustrated because you'll have people all around you always violating that time, but you have not set that boundary. So I think that's the other important thing is for all of the things that are really important to you, it's important for you to set those boundaries, especially with people who love you, because
Yes.
everybody wants to be in your face.
Yes.
Well, they love you all the time, and you just like, wait a minute, I need a moment. And
Right.
so, that is something that I have to make sure that I do for myself as well, is just set boundaries.
That is so powerful. And I think that's the one thing that we may have boundaries, but have we communicated those boundaries? And I think that's the important thing. It's very similar to how we always say you have to have clarity, right? Clarity on the boundaries that you need, or clarity on the things that you want and how you're going to get there. And usually you have to carve boundaries or place those boundaries in there so that you can get those things. And if you don't have the clarity and you don't set the boundaries, then how are you going to get there? Right. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, talking a little bit about, boundaries and people who are close to you, because a lot of the times we hear the saying, right, it takes a village, right? So if you have clarity on the goals that you want, you're communicating those boundaries, how has community played a part in your career and in your success in terms of leveraging your community? What would you say about that in terms of, not trying to do everything on your own or being isolated in your own kind of career?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, community has meant everything to me. Again, I have to give my parents a lot of credit for this, because my mother, in particular, my mother and my father, but my mother in particular was very much an advocate of me having girls as friends, and to like really sort of build up my sisterhood community from childhood. Just women from like different backgrounds and different experiences. She was very deliberate about giving me dolls that represented multicultural groups of women, because she found it really important that I see beauty and value in all different women from all different backgrounds. And not that she wasn't wanting me to, connect with boys, I guess, but she just really put a lot of effort into that. So much so that the woman that I claim as my best friend now to this day, I met her when I moved to North Carolina when I was in the 8th grade from Texas. And I met her because my mother insisted that she and I be friends. And that that was my mother's coworker. And my mother said, I think that, Shaquem would be a great friend for Amber. I think we need to make sure that they connect. And she is my best friend to this day, my sister friend, and my mother initiated making sure. And so like that is something that has been ingrained in me. I value that friendship so much. We've helped each other through so many different things over the years. And I am forever grateful to my mother for insisting that those relationships are things that I treasure. And so like I've been a very big, of course, I've been a very big advocate for, sisterhood. I'm in a historically Black sorority. And, I've just, that sort of, that connection to women friends has just been so important and so sustaining for me. My parents are also both graduates for both undergraduate and graduate school. They're both graduates of historically Black colleges, and they insisted that I go to a historically Black college for undergrad. And, again, just expanding that community and that sort of brother and sisterhood by way of that, being in an institution that is expecting for you to succeed, that's made for you to succeed, versus one that would be surprised. are both experiences that I've had, but that experience was so foundational for me as a young adult, because now when I went out into the world, I understood the difference. I understood the difference of being in a power dynamic where there were people in powerful positions that expected you to do well versus those who just kind of needed you to be there to check a box. That, that is I can't like express how much having that experience has helped me to understand where places that were good for me and those that weren't.
Right.
But yeah, so those sorts of communities, so my sorority, HBCU, church, all, professional communities, I've always been searching for my people. And that value was instilled in me when I was young. I was a part of PhD project as a PhD student,
Yes.
which is invaluable to me. I'm presently a board member on Marketing Ethnic Faculty Association, which first started as an alumni of the marketing DSA for PhD project. And just even that community of like, people of color, predominantly Hispanic, Black, and Indigenous people with marketing and advertising related PhDs trying to make it,
Yes.
but
Yes.
that community is like, everything. So even as I'm not in academia full time, I still find so much value in that community and supporting that community. So it's everything, but that was ingrained in me in childhood. So.
Wow, that is beautiful. And I think, the message that I was able to distill is that being intentional of making those connections with like-minded individuals, or surrounding yourself with individuals that are going to help you level up is key. And I think that's the one thing that I see a lot of the times where women, and the research shows that we're not intentional, and we don't leverage, or we're not strategic about building that community of individuals that are going to help you succeed. And I think that your mother was brilliant in that she instilled that in you, because you surround yourself with people, like you say, that expect you to do well, right? And lift you up to do well. And it goes to that saying, right, that, you are the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. So you have to be intentional in seeking that out. And I see evidence of that as you went through your career, whether it was, in college, in your actual career in academia, where you're surrounding yourself with people that really help you, keep moving forward. So the motivation is there. So that is beautiful. I could go on and have, conversation. I know we're wrapping up on time, but I have to touch our lightning round questions, which I find fascinating. They're part of the favorite part of the interview for me, because they tell so much. So if you're ready for that, I'd like to dive into those lightning questions and share what comes to mind for you. So first and foremost, what book has greatly influenced you?
Oh my gosh, I love books. Oh, I saw this question and I was just like, okay, but I'll just go with right now, The Warmth of Other Suns.
Say that again? I missed it.
The Warmth of Other Suns.
Okay, fantastic.
Because I think in this moment right now, we're seeing all of this violence. And I think it's important for us to capture based on our own history in this country. And whether you're an immigrant or you've been here for multiple generations, you have people in history in this country. And it's so important for you to know what that is so you can understand context. Like when you understand, at least for me, when I understand the history of violence that even made this country what it is, and how much this country has benefited from labor exploitation and so many other sorts of exploitation and violence, then what's happening right now makes a lot more sense. It doesn't make it better, but it makes more sense. And then when you understand where things are coming from, again, you know where you're headed. So that book right now is the one that kind of helped.
I'm definitely going to look into that one. What is your favorite inspiring quote or saying?
Um, uh, okay, this is gonna sound corny. Always believe and invest in yourself.
It's not
Um,
corny.
I know, but people say
You are
that.
your own best investment. It's just like
You
either you're gonna
are,
get
you are, but believing in yourself, even when people who love you are unsure
Yes,
or will doubt you, that's the hardest part.
yes,
You're always like, it's always one thing for people to be sort of naysayers that don't know you very well, and
hmm,
but when it's like a family member, or if it's a spouse or a sibling or somebody that you've known for a long time, it can really be hard, and then you start
right.
to question yourself. So it's really about like knowing what's right, doing what you think is right. And like my
Mm,
mom used to say, the people who love you, they'll come around.
that's so powerful. What is one word or moniker you would use to describe yourself?
Um, a perseverer, if that's
Mm, yes,
um, or someone who perseveres. I don't even know if perseverer is a real word.
it'll be your
Um,
word.
it'll be my word, yeah,
Yes.
because I think a good lesson and a hard lesson that I learned is that for many things, most things in life, being smart isn't good enough. It might
Mm,
just get you in the door. But
mm,
perseverance and emotional intelligence will take you over leaps and bounds. And
mm.
so that's what I learned as a PhD student, that being smart just got me through the door, but to graduate and finish with all of those egos and with all of the pushback and everything that could keep you from succeeding, that perseverance and emotional intelligence is what will get you through.
That is so insightful and powerful. I love that. What is one change, a habit, a behavior, action that you implemented that made your life better?
Taking rest seriously, but then
Mhm.
understanding the dimensions of rest. There's this Instagram like group that I follow called the NAP Ministry,
Mhm.
NAP
Nap.
Ministry,
Okay.
the
Uh-huh.
NAP Ministry, and it's faith based. And on the surface, it seems like really kitsch and cute, but like
Uh-huh.
they really talk about the value of prayer as part of
Mhm.
rest,
Mhm.
the connecting with community and loved ones as part of rest, of course
Mhm.
getting your sleep as part of rest,
Yes. Uh-huh.
taking naps, but just like being in community is rest.
Mm.
Engaging in your faith is rest. Like all of these aspects of rest that I had not considered, and like really dedicating time to make sure that I'm practicing some aspect of rest beyond sleep every day.
Mm.
And that
Yes.
has reduced my stress level. That helped me to lose weight, you
Mm.
know,
Yes.
just like all kinds of good, healthy things. Because like I understand now that rest is multidimensional, and that I have to prioritize it and engage in so many different aspects of it in order to be whole and healthy.
Wow, I love that. And I love what you just said of rest or self-care being multi-dimensional. It doesn't just mean sleep. There's so many things that'll help ground you that
Mhm.
that can be defined as rest. I think that's beautiful. That's awesome. Okay, so closing it out, what power song? So let's imagine you're about to walk out on stage. There's thousands of people out there. What song would be playing in the background as you walked out on the stage?
Oh my God. I forgot this one. Um,
What's your power song? What song gets you going?
um, uh, All the Stars, Kendrick Lamar.
All the Stars. All right.
Yeah,
That's a good one. That's a good
I
one.
I think one of the reasons why, because that's like one of my workout songs that
Uh-huh.
I'm always playing. But I think the first time I heard it, I was really struggling with,
Mhm.
you know, how I was being perceived. I think I was making
Mm.
the transition from academia back to the agency.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was worried about whether I could do it or not.
Mm.
I was worried about whether all of this new perspective I've gathered would be useful on a day-to-day in the
Mm-hmm.
agency. I, had freelanced all those years when I was in academia, but it's not the same exactly
Right.
when you're like in it on a day-to-day. And I just needed to hype myself up. And that was one of those songs that, got me back into myself. And then, where you have to have songs and creative
Yes.
inspiration that helps you to know who you are.
Uh-huh.
And that was, or remind you who you are. And that was one of those.
Fantastic. Well, Amber, thank you so much for all of your time. This has been a fascinating conversation. And I know that usually we get people who reach out all the time and say, hey, how can I connect with Amber? What's the best way for people to connect? Is it Instagram, LinkedIn?
Oh,
How would someone
LinkedIn.
follow it? Fantastic.
LinkedIn is the best.
All right.
Like not great at social media, but I at least try to keep that one updated and checked. So that is the best way to connect with me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. It was a pleasure having you, and I look forward to staying connected to you.
Yes, I would adore that. Yes, please. Thank you.